Hi there, and welcome to the Drum's B2B Festival. I'm Rebecca Stewart, Senior Reporter at The Drum. Today, I'm going to be discussing how to drive B2B business growth in 2021 with a brilliant group of marketing experts. We're going to talk about how growth is being redefined in these strange times and how business marketers can drive it by getting creative about their marketing and building purpose into their core. First up, though, I'd like to ask my panelists to introduce themselves. So, Ravleen, would you like to start?
Sure, thanks for having us. So I'm Ravleen Beeston, VP of Sales for Microsoft Advertising in the UK.
Great.
Hi, my name is Toni Clayton-Hein. I am the Chief Marketing Officer at EY, Ernst & Young, for the Americas.
Lovely. And David?
Yeah, Dave Silk. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Mitel in the communications and collaboration space. So thanks for having me.
Brilliant. We've got panelists from all over the world today, so we're delighted. But yeah, this is an interesting topic, growth in B2B. No one knows what's coming down the tracks next year. B2B marketers, especially in the pandemic, they're under more pressure than ever before to deliver more with less. Ad budgets are falling across the board for B2C and B2B marketers. So my first question I'd like to ask you guys, is to what extent is growth likely for business marketers and business brands in 2021? And maybe you can talk about if there's certain sectors that are ripe for growth. You all represent different corners of the industry, so keen to hear everyone's take on this. Ravleen, maybe you would like to start.
Yeah, I mean, look, from my perspective, growth is inevitable, I think, and particularly in the online space that we are in for many reasons, for the consumer shift that's going on around that behavior. It's just that growth might not come from traditionally the places that we've seen it come from before, and we just have to have a super keen eye on where is that growth shifting to, and are we able to adapt and really maximize what's happening. As a publisher, some of the examples that we've seen is traditionally the verticals where perhaps we've seen the high growth come from, given the shifting consumer landscape, aren't necessarily at the point where they were before. And we see this kind of cluster of emerging verticals and industries that are more relevant to what's going on in the world today, that are suddenly, seeing super, super high growth. So, for me, yes, is the short answer. I think there's tons of opportunity for growth. I just think that we might see it coming from different places. And I think that might even be set to change as we go into 2021 from even what we're seeing today.
Mm-hmm. And Dave, what's your take on this?
Yeah, it's, you'd love to have that crystal ball by which you could just predict what's likely to happen. I think the most important thing we're seeing are companies that are agile and flexible, or at least they certainly have to be, because there's so many dynamic changes that are coming at companies constantly. Certainly in our space in communications, we've seen a lot of growth in public sector and healthcare, anything IT focused, communications, certainly initially during COVID, to make sure that companies were kept working and we were able to get people working remotely very, very quickly. And I think it's going to be interesting, where does growth go in 2021? I think the companies that adapt, you're going to see far more automation. You'll see a lot of intelligence built into the way that we approach interactions. I think there's a downside almost in that you may see growth coming from companies that are removing the interaction between people as we become almost a more contactless society. And I think that's sad and challenging in a way. And I do think you'll see a counterbalance to that in terms of a lot of investment into the creation of experiences, how we drive that reconnection of people. So I think you're going to see a lot of different things happening very, very quickly, and being agile and flexible is so important.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, agility is the one word that kind of keeps coming up again, and I'm sure will come up a few times in this discussion. And Toni, what about you?
Well, we're in an interesting position because at EY we have such a wide portfolio, from the strategy business to the consulting business, the tax and global trade business, as well as audit. And so we've seen, as depending on the sector or industry, as you mentioned, high degree of M&A activity. We've seen certainly anybody that is in the consumer space, lots of growth in how do we look at new buyer behaviors and how do we connect to them. We're really lucky to have, for example, I have at my disposal some of the consultants that work in the marketing space, and they are really focused on how do you take all the data that we are now capturing, because everything is digital, and being able to turn that into insights so that we can better connect with people virtually. And then how does that actually also drive our content strategy, because now we have a better pulse on what kind of content is resonating and is engaging. So from a marketing standpoint, it helps us point our dollars and our efforts in that particular way, because every sector seems to be reacting differently, and growth maybe in some non-traditional pockets, as you mentioned.
Yeah, great. And you guys have already kind of touched on my next question, which is really how will growth, in 2021 differ from the growth we've seen in 2019 across industries? We've just come through a pandemic. Things are going to be different. Dave, as you mentioned, companies need to be agile, they need to be flexible. What will be the differences in the growth we've seen, 2 years ago compared to next year?
Yeah, maybe I think in the one thing that we're gonna all have to really think about is that we may see growth in industries or companies that we've never even thought of before. I mean, there are companies that are literally being created to address certain issues and problems that just did not exist in 2019. And I live in Galway on the west coast of Ireland, and it's been amazing to see the technical diversity of biomed and the medical industry in general, as they look at how do we deal with COVID, how do we look at the testing, how does that spin up an industry that just did not exist. A small little example within our own company, Mitel, is that we've had to invest into handsets for phones that they can be resistant to infection and COVID, which is amazing. And the other piece we've seen is just a huge movement towards a hybrid type work environment and workplace, by which we all walked into offices, expected our own desk or our own space. And I really think when you walk back into that environment in 2021 or whenever that may be, it's going to be completely different. You're going to see a lot of different type of companies that don't exist or are just spinning up and beginning, that are looking at the workplace and are looking at the workspace and really thinking through the interaction of the person with either technology or communication. So that's a roundabout way of saying I think we've got to be completely open-minded and be always on the look for different pockets that will spin up very, very quickly to serve a specific need at a very distinct point in time.
Definitely. And Ravleen and Tony, what do you guys make of this?
I think all great points made there in terms of where growth is going to come. I think as we look at obviously the technology as was mentioned, the workplace as was mentioned, and just the other side of that workplace in terms of health. So how is health everybody's business, whether that is the workplace itself, it is about how we're engaging with clients and customers, whether it's about what is investments made in healthcare and servicing the healthcare industry. So I think we'll see a lot of growth in those areas as well. And then health and also terms of mental health of workers, right? We're seeing it right now as people, as countries are locking down again, and as this resurgence happens, the toll it's taking on mental health, and also the ways that we have to provide support to not just our customers, but the employees, and thinking through that so that we can make sure that asset, is protected, because it's quite frankly our most important asset is our people. So how do we protect that as well?
Yeah, definitely. And that's something we'll come on to a bit later, actually, balancing, people, purpose, profit. But yeah, we will come on to that. That's a great point. Okay, great. Cool. Let's move on to the next question then, which is all about how marketers can change their strategies to drive growth next year. So until now, it might be a little bit of a stereotype, but B2B marketing has relied on white papers, kind of physical events, things like webinars to drive sales growth, drive marketing growth. But now we're seeing B2B marketers get a bit creative and a bit more playful. They're getting a bit more interested in investing in digital and social where they might not have before. what marketing strategies do they need to employ growth in 2021? What do B2B marketers need to change next year in terms of their marketing blueprint to drive growth? What do you think, Rivlin?
Yeah, I think the focus on just human insights and being able to really listen and listen hard and observe deeply is going to become super important in any strategy that I think any marketer has, by the way, not just B2B. Becoming a real expert in detecting human signals, what they mean for your organization, and how you can respond to that at speed, I think is going to be super important. I think that there's, this is going to drive Dave mentioned it earlier, but like a really ferocious era of innovation if companies and marketers are willing to engage in that. I also believe that companies will be more creative and unintrusive in their methods of listening, just to really get their fingers on the pulse. Looking at some of, I guess, how we've been perhaps looking at that at Microsoft, in how we can help some of our customers and marketers with unintrusive data. Is if you think about search as almost being like this engine of intention, where you can see what people in the world are searching for, what is it that they're looking for, what is it that they need. You can see that in the information that you get. And we've been really focused on how can we use that unintrusive data and insight to help some of the businesses that we work with to understand and empathize with what's going on in the world and what is required and what's needed.
Yeah, so big changes there. And Dave, you mentioned earlier, that B2B marketing might pivot a bit more towards experiences and that kind of personal experience in a world that's not physical and is a bit more kind of frictionless. Can you maybe expand a little on that?
I've always been a believer that there's many facets of marketing, but certainly the blending of the art and science of what we do as a profession is always profound. And I think everybody would have been beating the drum about the importance of data and the importance of intelligence, and you got to measure everything. And that's the holy grail of B2B marketing. And I think we've had to reawaken ourselves again that isn't all it is, because I think you're going to find that there's going to be a huge need for just a reemergence of people and a need for connectivity. And I think that's going to drive a real hunger for experiences. Now, hopefully those experiences will become physical again. But in the absence of that, you're going to see a lot of focus on immersive virtual experiences that go beyond, they really probe into how can we make this interaction really dynamic, and how can I evoke an emotion or a behavior as I would if I was in person with somebody. And that's quite difficult to do in a screen to screen setting. So again, back to one of the earlier points, I think you'll find companies that may not necessarily be associated with video or collaboration or meetings becoming involved in an immersive ecosystem of what that virtual experience is going to become. It could be both, for example, in terms of the sound or the visual experience, but it'll become very dynamic. But I do firmly believe that the immersiveness of the experience will become really, really important. We've got to become incredibly creative and dynamic if we really want to make this virtual experience different to what it is today.
Yeah, definitely. And Tony, what are some of the things that EY has been changing, amid the pandemic, and more generally, how do you think marketers need to retune their strategies a bit going into next year?
I think it's if I were to pull on the thread that Dave was saying is regarding creating that emotional connection in a virtual environment. We're spending a lot more time and energy building out creative conversations that involve stories, right? Not just what you get, but where does the empathy piece come in, and where does the understanding come in? Where's the listening, as Rivlin was mentioning, coming in, so that when we think about how we're telling that story, it's less more, I'll not say cold, but more specific to just a business to business environment. And it's much more of a human conversation, which really takes into account not just the business at hand, but the environment that you're living in and the interactions that you do or don't have with people or you wish you could create. So I definitely feel like that human element and the storytelling element is more prevalent, and something that we could always steal from the B2C world, and just gives us a bit more almost from a nice to have to a need to have in order to cut through as people are sitting in front of their screens every day.
Yeah, and that human element is something that B2B marketers have been, playing around with a bit more amid the pandemic. We've seen a lot of B2B brands embrace purpose, whether that be, supplying the NHS or providing critical technology that people need to order their shopping. How important is purpose going to be for B2B brands going into next year in order to drive growth? And just how are they balancing that kind of sense of purpose with the need to drive profit? It's a question for everyone, so whoever wants to go first can have a shot.
Go on, David, did you want to kick off? Or?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, look, I think the pandemic is putting brand purpose to its true test, right? I think the coronavirus crisis has really forced brands to back up their purposeful words with action. And I think the world has really high expectations from the brands that they connect with. I don't actually think it's a choice for companies anymore to get this balance right. Getting it right will be the growth driver, in my opinion. And I think without it, a company is in trouble. And it's really becoming table stakes, not just for businesses, but for acquiring talent, and growing your business in that perspective. How I believe brands can do this, I think taking brand purpose discussions out of simply the marketing departments and into the very core of business discussions, that for me is how you really accelerate this discussion, where your business model is your marketing, it is your brand message. And actually it's not simply about landing a message, it's how you serve your community, your society, and how you treat your employees, because the world is watching all of those things. And so I think anyone who's looking to do this, there are some really key questions that companies need to be asking themselves on a regular basis. Why does your company exist? How does it contribute to societal, economic, environmental progress? Is your supply chain secure? Is it ethical? These discussions have to be at the table of any business discussion. It's not a marketing or a brand piece. It is a business discussion to have.
Yeah, that's interesting. And we are seeing some more brands, maybe more on the B2C side just now, kind of baking that purpose into their boards and giving marketers more of a seat at the table. I guess that's a discussion for a kind of different day. But Tony, I'm keen to hear your take on where you think purpose fits into the equation for B2B marketers and how it will drive growth in 2021.
Yeah, I think Rivlin said it perfectly. And I feel very lucky because EY has more of a sense of purpose woven through the entire fabric of the firm that I have ever seen, any company that I've ever worked with. So our purpose to build a better working world is our tagline. It is something that we wake up to every day. It's really, and because it's so prevalent, and I've been there just coming on 2 years now, something that I hadn't seen, that the way Rivlin talked about it, which is you can't make it up. It can't be manufactured from a marketing standpoint. I get to see it every day, so I feel really lucky from that standpoint from us anyway.
Mm-hmm. And David?
Yeah, it's the word that Rivlin used, which just sticks with me, is the word true. And I think that the brand always got lumped into marketing, and hey, look, take care of the brand and what does it look like, and make sure that it, everybody's compliant with the brand. And the brand now is it's the life and it's the essence of a company. And unless you're true to what you believe the brand and the values of the brand, and when I say you, I mean all of the stakeholders. So an employee is going to be one of the most critical judges of the brand, and absolutely rightly so. And that voice, the voice of the employee, has gotten louder and stronger. And again, that's right, because each and every day we go to work and we represent a company or a brand, and it has to be part of the values that we hold as people too. And I think we've all learned that over the last 9 months, that you want to you have to believe in the brand of the company that you work with. It has to be whole and true to you, because it's not just as simple as representing, certainly in our roles, representing a brand from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. You represent it 24/7, and it becomes and has become part of you as part of this blended life that we're living, for all the weaknesses and faults that go along with that. But that word really stuck with me that Raveline used, which is you've got to be true, and the brand has to be true, because otherwise it'll, you just can't make it up. It'll be fake, and it'll be found out far too quickly.
Yeah. So authenticity is kind of really key for brands going.
Authentic. Yes. And then, people throw around the word, trust and authentic, and you earn trust, and you have to live. And the greatest way to understand if people trust a company is look at the customers or look at the employees, and very quickly they'll represent the true values of that company. And I think that is so important right now.
Yeah, definitely. And there's some nice examples in the B2C space of brands that really are driving growth through purpose. One that kind of just immediately springs to mind is Unilever. Brands like Dove are its fastest growing brands, underpinned by a really strong sense of purpose. Lifebuoy too. But yeah, in the coming year, it'd be great to see some examples of that from the kind of B2B side, and I'm sure that we will. And yeah, some great points raised there by you all around kind of authenticity and purpose and truth. But I'm keen to hear, all of you work with agencies. There's only so much, internal marketing departments can do without their partners to drive growth. So how can agencies play a role in helping drive growth for B2B brands and B2B marketers next year? Raveline, do you want to start us with this one?
I'm gonna hand to Tony and David, because I think probably their experience working with agencies in the way that you're kind of waiting for an answer to this question is probably different. So I wonder whether they've probably got a more rounded experience to answer that.
I can give you, at Mitel, we don't just work, we rely on agencies as our partners, as part of the team. If I was to condense it down into a couple of sentences, for what we're really looking for right now is perspective. It's, again, when you're within a company and you go through the pandemic and all of the challenges that are associated with that, it's too easy at times to become insular and inside looking. And one of the really important jobs of the agencies is to take that outside view. And of course, they provide that outside skill set, which you need, but give an expertise based on an external view to, it could be to guide the conversation, or as Tony mentioned, to guide how do you tell the story that's relevant today, and how do you make it more conversational? That would be an exceptional role for an agency, that they would walk in today and say, look, I'd like to tell you, Mitel, that there's a way that you can tell that story in a different way. And just because I might be inwardly looking, I need that external perspective. And the final thing the agency will give is that unique skill set. And it could be on something very specific that I just may not necessarily have in-house. But I do feel very strongly that we absolutely rely on agencies as our partners today. Is it more stronger today than it was? I'm not necessarily sure. We've always depended on that, and I would expect that will continue well into the future.
Yeah, always good to have that kind of big picture thinking and outside pair of eyes.
Yes.
And Tony,
yeah, just to add to that I agree with everything Dave just said, and I'd say the one thing I always look to is to keep us honest from the competitive landscape. So, we spend a lot of time thinking that our value proposition is unique, and our positioning is unique, and our story is unique. And, having the agency help us understand how true that is or is not, and being comfortable to be able to say, this is where you're falling short. This is where you might not be as differentiated as you think. And here's a different way to look at that. So that outside perspective, not just from here's different tactics that people are using, here's different methods that, and types of stories, but also here is where you can actually have an ownable piece of messaging or real estate that would help you drive forward, right? Everybody's in a competitive business situation every day. So just trying to think through, I really rely on them to say, this is interesting, but not quite as differentiated as you think, or this is right on because no one else is really owning this territory. Here's what it would take to own that as a category, as a territory, as a story. And I really have been thrilled with our best partners are ones that do that.
Yeah, so giving that kind of broader overview of the market, which obviously is super important right now, and as we move into next year. So yeah, we've spoken about all kinds of things today. You know, how B2B brands can drive growth with agencies, how they, you know, can tailor their marketing strategies for next year to make them more creative, more digital, to drive growth there. But final question for you all. What is the one key skill that you think B2B marketers need going into 2021 if they want to drive growth for their business? It's just a kind of quick fire question. And Tony, I'm going to start with you on this one.
I would say, and I think Raylene mentioned it, which was active listening, right? Which is just constantly scanning the market and how quickly things are changing and making sure that we are being proactive, we are being on message and on point with where people are, not just from a buyer standpoint, but sort of emotional readiness to receive a message in the right way. So I think for me, active listening is would be a key skill.
Yeah, great. So constantly keeping one eye on the market and kind of listening in there. Raylene, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I think empathy. I think as B2B marketers, putting yourselves in the shoes of your partners to try and understand, you know, what the needs are and what the expectation is. I think if you can, you know, genuinely, if you can nail that, then that for me will take B2B to a place where it can really, really accelerate growth.
Great, so empathy. And David, last but not least, your kind of top skill.
For me, it's agility. It's you know, there's so many things coming at people on just a constant basis that having the ability to be agile and change direction with speed, and more importantly, be open to change direction with speed. I think that is fundamentally important to me right now.
Great. So listen, have empathy, and be agile. The kind of main messages from our panel here to any B2B marketers watching. Thank you so much to you all for joining us. It was a really, really good discussion. And thank you for watching at home. You can find more B2B Festival content over on thedrum.com and on our social channels. Thanks so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.